Hola, hola, welcome back to the American Dream Despite It All. Al grano. I am your host, Nora Vargas. And we are living in difficult times. Around the world and right here at home, we're fighting for our democracy. Rights we thought were secure are being chipped away. Injustices pile up, and for many of us, it still feels super heavy, even exhausting. So here's the question: how do we keep fighting for democracy for our communities, for our families, while also fighting for ourselves? How do we shift the paradigm and push back against everything we were taught? That we have to sacrifice, that we have to hustle until we collapse, putting ourselves first is selfish. And so that's the reason why I created this podcast, to get to al grano, to have real talk about what it means to live the American dream, not just surviving, but thriving with corazon and grit despite it all. So today, we're going to talk about the need to relearn that rest is revolution. Because for so many of us, the American dream has come to mean hustling until we can't anymore. And let's be real. I often say that when you love what you do, it's glorious, that you don't even feel it, right? Do what you love. You'll never feel, like you're working ever. But you know what? The truth is, that's not the whole story. Even when you love what you do, it still takes its toll, because purpose doesn't protect you from exhaustion, and passion doesn't erase the sacrifices we make along the way. So that's why we have to remember, the goal isn't just to do meaningful work, it's to do it in a way that lets us keep living fully, joyfully, and with corazon. So let's be real. The hustle industry is overrated. For most of my life, I have lived by it and I've believed it. And if it was always like, just work a little harder, no necesito dormir. It was like a badge of honor that I could sleep 5 hours and 4 hours and wake up and go to a press conference and be an executive and, cook for my family and go hang out with my dogs and do it all. And I kept giving more and more and more. And finally, it was this idea of like having to prove to myself and to others, to the world. I don't know. I really think it was just to try to prove to myself that I could do it all. But somewhere along the way, I realized that the hustle was stealing the very thing I thought I was fighting for: my peace, my creativity, and my health. This past year, I've been on my own health journey, and it's really been amazing, right? So now I kayak on Saturdays. Well, it was Sunday, now it's Saturdays. I swim twice a week, sometimes 3 times, but most of it, I'm very disciplined about doing it twice a week. I'm strength training, which I had never done before. Before I would run, like half marathons and stuff. Yeah, andaba como loca. I would run half marathons and do everything else I was doing. And I'm like, why? So anyway, the one thing that I do now is I rest. I take naps. I know it's weird, but I'm not doing it to fit anyone's idea of what wellness is, right? I'm doing it because I want to live a very full, intentional life. And I want to make sure I have the energy for the long run. And honestly, as I think about women who are doing it right, I think about Jane Fonda, I think about Dolores Huerta, I think about Cher, not just because she's dating a really young guy and I'm like, okay, that's like amazing, but because these mujeres are out there and they're still using their voices. They're showing up with style, with purpose, and with power, and they're aging with joy. And let's be real, they look like they're having fun doing it. So why not do it when you're still having fun, right? And that's the kind of energy I want for this next chapter. And this is the conversation that I want to have today. I want us to be strong, to be grounded, and I want us to feel joy, still laugh, and have fun. And I wanted to talk about it today because I want to challenge us. I want to challenge my listeners, the listeners, to think about what you're doing to break these patterns. What would it look like if you gave yourself permission to rest, to just slow down, to breathe, to prioritize your well-being, not after a crisis, but before it? Because the truth is, breaking the cycle starts with awareness and a decision to do things differently. You know, when I first started, I've done yoga, I've done it all, todo, meditation, and I actually do meditate. But I have conversations with friends and they're like, no, es que yo no puedo, I can't meditate. I'm like, I'm not saying, I've talked about this before. I'm not saying, go do this or go do that. It's whatever feels good for you. I've been involved with organizations like Mana and Hope, right, for many years. And I've really met some amazing mujeres super chingonas. And we've lost some of them really young. Mujeres increíbles, brilliant, fierce, radiant women who gave everything to their work and to their communities, but rarely gave themselves permission to slow down. And I don't know how much we didn't even give them permission either, right? And it breaks my heart because they were the ones holding it up for everyone else. They made miracles happen at home, in boardrooms, in our neighborhoods. Ándale, otra junta. Ándale, some other committee. Ándale, que no sé qué. And I'm guilty of it too, right? But I've thought a lot about this, and I don't know how much. I think a lot has to do with the fact that my mom passed away at 63, right? She passed away at 63. She had cancer, and it really shook me. It shook me because I have thought a lot about what it means to us mujeres, that it's like we wait until we get that diagnosis to start taking care of ourselves. And primero los niños, primero los perros, primero el esposo, everybody, right? But sometimes our bodies can't wait, and they're screaming at us, and we don't listen. And one of my favorite quotes is Audre Lorde's quote, right? Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And I've posted it, right, in my Instagram, and mi tenía, Twitter, todas esas cosas, TikTok, todo eso. But I think about it, right? So you post it, but do you really do it? And not only that, but then, like, how judgy am I of other people, right? Oh, I'm going to take time off. Oh, I'm going to turn my phone down. But there's a crisis. Where are you? ¿Por qué no me contestas? And I think about when Audre Lorde wrote this particular quote, and she wrote those words while she was battling cancer. And she was writing about what it was like to be a Black queer woman in America, fighting for survival and for dignity and joy in a world that tries to erase you. And I think those words for me really connected. And I think it connects with all of us because at their core, they really are about what it means to survive in a system that wasn't created for us or by us. And a system that just takes and takes until we're empty. And in this pursuit of the American dream and what that means, it is really ourselves that suffer the most, right? And so I want us to have this conversation, and not just for us, people who are my generation, but for the generations to come. And I really love working with young people because sometimes it's when you learn the hustle mentality, like trabaja toda la noche, trabaja todo el día, da, 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 it's really, I think, challenging sometimes to understand how these newer generations want to have that so-called balance, right? And I say so-called balance not to minimize it, but to say, like, what does that look like? And I think it looks like differently for everybody else. For everyone, it looks different, I guess is what I should say. But I really think that if we start thinking about what rest is and how resting isn't about giving up, but rest is really this idea of resistance. It's this idea of revolution, right? And I think there's an app that really focuses on this, and I think it's amazing. But I want us to think about it, about how to acknowledge that there is a lot of privilege in being able to rest sometimes, right? And so there's this tension, right? Because some people can take time off and others can't. And some of us have the benefit and the flexibility and support systems, as hard as it is. But so many of our people don't, right? Many of our immigrants, our single moms, hourly workers, they don't have those options. And we're fighting every day, so many of us, to make sure that they have those options. So as this conversation, as we have these conversations, we have to understand the tension that exists. But I think that's really why this conversation matters. Because if rest is a privilege, then making rest possible for everyone is really justice. So in this notion, right, that nationally we don't talk about equity anymore, inclusivity, etc., we need to think about policies that protect our workers, that paid sick leave, the mental health access. That is justice. That is a right. And, it is a scary time. People are losing their jobs. Funding is drying up. Fear is real. But if we don't have our health, physical, emotional, and mental, we have absolutely nothing left to give. So we're still carrying the weight of COVID. I think we all, as somebody who was in a position where I was hustling, right, to make sure and create programs and making sure that our communities were safe, and super proud of the fact that 99% of our communities had access, to vaccines and etc. I think that the grief, the anxiety, the exact exhaustion hasn't really left. Many of us lost people. We lost what we thought was normal, or normalcy, as they say. And we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, pretending that things were just going to get back to normal. And that normal wasn't that great for many, right? For many of us. So I think what I'm asking is that we know better. And we understand that there's a collective trauma that lingers in our bodies, in our communities, and our sense of safety. And that's why I say, the hustle is overrated. Because I firmly believe that in this season of life, for me and for so many of us, it's about redefining what success looks like. It's about strength and stillness, discipline and softness. It's about showing up, but also knowing when to slow down or step back. I want to be strong enough to lead and wise enough to rest. And so as we talk about our No Manches segment, let me just say, have you ever noticed how busy has become a badge of honor? A mí esta me da vergüenza when people would say, oh, no, I don't want to bother you because you're really busy. And I'm like, ay, Dios mío, ¿cómo estás? Ay, pues ya sabes, bien ocupada, bien ocupada. It's like this badge of honor of like, I'm tired and it makes me more important. But we've turned burnout into like a bragging right? And, it's interesting because when men take a break, it's well deserved. They need a vacation. But when women, especially Latinas, take one, people start to wonder if we've lost our drive. And, men slow down and they get celebrated, right? I mean, fue a cuidar al niño. But when women rest, people question our commitment, like rest means that we've stopped caring. Y la verdad es que, pues, no manches. We've inherited generations of ponte las pilas energy from our moms, our abuelitas, our families who expect that we're going to take care of everything and everyone. And people who came before us who never had the luxury to stop. They had no safety net. So some of us that do, we have still a sense of guilt for resting. So here's the twist. The American dream, despite it all, has often meant working yourself to exhaustion just to prove that you deserve a seat at the table. We were told that if we just hustled hard enough, sacrificed enough, we'd make it. But what if that dream was never meant to be that exhausting? Because if your dream costs you your health, your joy, and your peace, it's not a dream. It's actually a warning. So now when someone says, wow, Nora, you're always doing so much, I laugh and say, actually, I'm doing less. But everything I do with purpose. So I want us to retire the hustle badge. Let's replace it with balance, boundaries, and presence. Let's make it tranquila pero chingona. That's like the new flex, right? Because it's important for us and for our communities. And so we've all been taught to measure success, but by what we build, the job, the title, the recognition, the empire. But what if real success isn't just about what we build? It's about what we're able to sustain. And so en este granito de oro, it's important for me to remind you that yes, the hustle might build an empire, but rest builds endurance, and endurance builds a legacy. Legacy isn't just about what we leave behind. It's about how we live right now. It's the energy we bring into the room, the love we give, the light we protect. And that is where the glory comes in. Because glowing isn't about doing more. It's about being more aligned. It's about being grounded in your purpose. honoring your energy, and giving yourself permission to shine without burning out. So here's your glow check, your homework for this episode, because you need more work, right? But just think about it, right? Ask yourself, where am I still hustling for approval instead of acting for purpose? Take a minute and reflect. What's one small thing I can do this week to nurture my health, my body, my mind, and my soul? Set a boundary and say no to one thing that drains you, and yes, one thing that restores you. It's important, right? Rest without guilt. Even 5 minutes of stillness counts. Celebrate a win, big or small, not for what you achieved, but for how you showed up. Set a boundary. Say no to one thing that drains you and restores you. Remember that. That's how we start shifting from hustle to harmony, from pressure to purpose, from surviving to glowing. Because this is what the glow is all about. It's not about having it all. It's about honoring it all. Your dreams, your health, your peace, and your joy. I'm Nora Vargas, and this is El Grano, the American Dream Despite It All. Remember, the dream isn't to hustle until we break. It's to live, to thrive, to lead with corazón, with balance, and with joy. Until next time, rest, recharge, and make sure you glow.